Welcome back to the deep dive. If you work in language education, or, well, if you've ever tried to learn a language yourself, generative AI, genAI, it's shifted everything. For a long time, the big institutional conversation was really about fear, wasn't it? Misconduct, banning the tools.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's so interesting now and what we're seeing in these sources is that the conversation has thankfully moved on. We've gathered quite a bit of material here, mostly real-world classroom action research. It's coming from professionals in the Australian ELICOS program that's English language intensive courses for overseas students. And these educators, they basically stopped panicking and, well, they started experimenting.
Right. And that's exactly our mission today. We want to shortcut that learning curve for you. We're really diving into the trenches of ELT, English language teaching, to pull out the specific methods, some pretty surprising student reactions, actually, and the concrete things they discovered. The actionable insights when they put tools like ChatGPT, Co-Pilot, specialized apps, when they put them to the test. The big question is, how do we use this stuff ethically and, effectively right now? Okay, so let's unpack this first big idea, because it's not really about the student initially, it's about the teacher. One powerful finding, maybe a less obvious one, is using AI for the educator as a kind of meta tool for their own professional development, for classroom improvement, specifically for action research, or AR.
Oh, definitely. It's a huge time saver. I mean, for busy teachers, finding the time to do rigorous research, that's often the biggest hurdle, right? We found genAI can dramatically streamline, especially the initial stages and the final stages of that research cycle. Take like finding a focus. A teacher might have this sort of vague idea, something like, my B2 students struggle with argumentative essays.
Right, a fuzzy concept. So what do? Just plug that into the AI?
Pretty much, they feed it directly into tools like, say, Co-Pilot or Perplexity AI. And the AI can quickly analyze trends in current language teaching, pedagogy, and then generate really specific, actionable research questions. I was really struck by one example in a source. A teacher asked the AI to generate AR questions about how can I use AI to assess writing for B2 English language learners?
And the AI just spits out usable questions.
Instantly, yeah. A set of focused questions a teacher could actually tackle in a short cycle. Things like, what specific AI tools are most effective for this group?
Yeah.
And that just moves the teacher right past that initial planning hurdle, straight into doing it.
Okay, that makes sense for getting started.
Exactly. And that efficiency, it carries through to the back end too, especially data collection and analysis. AI can suggest suitable methods, maybe interviews for qualitative data, surveys for quantitative, or a mix tailored exactly to that refined research question.
And the analysis part, we know that's often where these small-scale AR projects kind of, well, they die on the vine, don't they? Sifting through pages of interview transcripts for themes, it's painstaking.
It really is. But tools like Microsoft Power BI, maybe Tableau, you feed them the data with some genAI prompting. They can rapidly pull out themes, even sub-themes, from qualitative data. For the quantitative stuff, AI can handle data cleansing, spot relationships between data sets. It just gives the teacher time back, time to focus on the meaning of the data, not just the mechanical counting.
But I do wonder about relying on it too much there. If the AI is doing the heavy lifting on analysis, isn't there a risk, like introducing bias or just missing some crucial context? Can you really trust an AI to get the themes right from interviews in one specific classroom?
That's the absolute critical piece, and the research is really clear on this. The AI is a powerful assistant, no doubt. But the critical evaluation, that stays firmly with the human. Your professional intuition, your knowledge of that specific classroom, the ethical sensitivity, especially around privacy in small AR projects, that has to be applied by the teacher. You use the AI to generate ideas, sure, but your context, your judgment, makes the final call.
That makes perfect sense. The teacher as the expert curator, the critical filter. Okay, let's pivot now from teacher research to direct student application. Let's start with writing, because this is the area, isn't it, that's most plagued by those fears of academic misconduct. So how do these teachers flip that narrative?
Well, they shifted the focus away from using AI just for the final product and put it squarely onto the process, particularly idea generation and crucially critical feedback. Laura Wakeland's research using Co-Pilot, it's a great example here. She designed tasks where genAI acted in one of three roles. They could be a search engine, a debating partner, or a personal tutor.
Okay, 3 different ways to interact. The idea being that students would actually engage with the content, not just, copy-paste.
Exactly. But here's the really surprising bit from the early cycles. Students overwhelmingly preferred the search engine function. It got 12 votes. Compare that to just 2 votes for the personal tutor and only 1 for the debating partner.
Wow. Only 1. That tells me, maybe, that given the choice, students often default to the path of least resistance. We all do, right? Just give me the quick answer.
It speaks volumes about student habits, I think. The debating function, which requires that sustained critical interaction where the student actually has to push back against the AI, sometimes they found it irritating or just too hard. Students actually complained, I can never win this debate. AI is too clever.
Mm.
It really shows us that AI literacy isn't just intuitive. We need to explicitly teach students how to interact critically, productively with these tools. You can't just hand them the debate coach and expect magic.
That's a massive insight. So the resistance isn't really the AI itself, it's the effort needed for genuine critical thinking. So how did others manage to enforce that critical thinking, especially around feedback?
Well, that leads us straight into the fascinating work by Rima Sarwal and Liz Stoyanova. They effectively sort of embrace the AI as a partner, but a flawed one. They use a very specific restrictive prompt. List my errors. Do not rewrite the text.
Oh, interesting. So the AI was banned from actually fixing the errors. It could only point them out.
Precisely. Students got the raw feedback, the unpolished suggestions. Then, crucially, they were forced to actively select and highlight the feedback they thought was relevant before they discussed it in groups. And the key pedagogical strength they found, it was the occasional imperfection, the inconsistency of the AI's feedback.
That seems counterintuitive, though. If the feedback is sometimes wrong, wouldn't students just get frustrated and, I don't know, stop using it? Doesn't that risk turning them off?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But because they knew they couldn't just blindly trust the AI, they were forced to stop, to pause, analyze the suggestion, compare it against what they already knew about grammar, and then justify their choices to their peers. It totally shifted their focus, away from just getting a perfect final piece and towards really engaging deeply with the process of learning, of evaluating language. That imperfection, it turned the AI from a potential cheat tool into basically a critical thinking exercise.
That's actually a brilliant way to flip a perceived weakness into a learning strength.
Okay, moving beyond writing now, let's look at speaking skills, interactive communication, an area where traditionally getting that individualized one-on-one practice is just incredibly time-consuming for teachers. Yeah, it really is. Dialogic Ibrahim and Brad McClymon's research focused right on this. They used ChatGPT specifically to develop academic discussion skills. They set up this structured kind of learning continuum, scaffolding the AI's roles. First, it was just a simple brainstorming partner. Then it became a dynamic discussion coach using the voice interaction feature, which is key. And finally, a feedback tutor.
So step-by-step support, essentially like a tireless, patient practice partner available 24/7. Did this setup actually, move the needle on those complex discussion skills, like arguing a point or asking good questions?
The results were pretty dramatic, actually. When they tallied instances of key discussion skills comparing pre- and post-assessments, the increases were huge. Interaction, just the ability to keep the back and forth going, that jumped 138%. Elaboration, expanding on ideas, up 81%. And investigation, asking those probing questions, critically engaging, what we might call critical questioning, that saw a massive 546% increase, though admittedly from a low starting point.
Wow, a 546% increase in critical questioning. That's astonishing. What did the students say about why it worked so well? What was the feeling?
The key theme that came through was the safe space. Students really valued that discussion coach because it allowed practice anytime, anywhere without that fear. Fear of criticism or judgment from a peer or even the teacher. They specifically mentioned that the coach does not make people nervous. It just removed that effective filter, didn't it? Letting them practice the mechanics of discussion until they felt more confident.
That's incredibly powerful, reducing performance anxiety just through the tech itself. Okay, let's tackle one more area, pronunciation. Another really critical skill that, let's be honest, often gets short shrift because of time limits and a packed curriculum.
Definitely. Gabriel Aspoqueta and Heather Sparrow looked into this. They blended traditional pronunciation lessons with instant feedback apps, things like Bold Voice and ELSA Speak. They use these apps for formative, really personalized feedback outside of the main class time.
Okay, and what did they find about student confidence? And crucially, how did students react to the fact that these apps often promote a very specific sort of prestige accent model? Was that an issue?
Well, nearly 80% of the students reported feeling significantly more confident in their pronunciation afterwards. So that's a big win. And this part is vital. While they definitely acknowledged the apps were pushing a certain accent, usually a standardized American or British one, They generally did not feel pressured to mimic a native speaker perfectly.
Oh, interesting. Why not? Because often you hear criticism that these apps reinforce the idea that only one or two accents are correct.
Exactly. That's the common critique. But in this study, the students valued the apps not for achieving native-like perfection, but for the personalized practice that focused on intelligibility. Just being clearly understood, it really reinforces the idea that maybe ELT pedagogy is actually succeeding in shifting that focus away from perfect conforming accents towards functional communication. It seems they were using the apps to meet their own personal learning goals, kind of regardless of the app's underlying bias towards one model.
So, okay, whether it's helping teachers with their research or enabling critical evaluation in student writing, facilitating that 24/7 discussion practice, or giving individual pronunciation feedback, the common thread seems to be the human teacher's role shifting, right? Moving from being the sole source of knowledge and feedback to being more of an expert curator, a designer of tasks, and a guide for that structured interaction with the AI.
That's absolutely the through line for all this research, yes. The teachers are setting the parameters. They're guiding the critical engagement that's needed for, genuine learning to actually happen. Hashtag tag outro. So ultimately, this deep dive really confirms that AI isn't just another tool. It's a powerful, probably necessary and definitely complex resource in ELT today. But its success, it seems to rely entirely on AI literacy for both the student and the teacher, and on its thoughtful, structured, reflective integration by the human teacher. You can't just switch it on.
Yeah, this research really shows a clear and I think exciting shift. We're moving away from seeing AI purely as a threat that forces us into policing mode and more towards seeing it as a complementary resource, something that empowers students to practice more effectively and also, frankly, massively increases teacher efficiency in certain areas.
And if we think back to that Sarwal and Stoyanova study on writing feedback, remember, we saw that perhaps the greatest pedagogical value came from the AI's very imperfections. Because those flaws, those inconsistencies, they force the students to stop, to really analyze and to apply critical human judgment.
Which brings us to our final provocative question for you to think about. If the ultimate pedagogical value of AI in some cases lies precisely in its ability to force us to exercise critical judgment when it fails to be perfectly accurate, what essential critical thinking skills might we inadvertently be sacrificing when we spend so much time and effort trying to engineer these AI systems to be perfectly, flawlessly accurate all the time? Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.